Don't really plan on going to an LS anytime soon. I mean, never say never. If something were to happen to this engine, I guess it would be something I would consider. But don't really plan on going to an LS anytime soon. I mean, never say never.
Well, here we are. After 6 months, I finally have the new engine for the Oldsmobile, and much to the dismay of purists, it's not an Oldsmobile engine. Now, at the end of last season, it became very clear to my dad and I that the car was being held back by its engine. The chassis felt good, suspension felt good, brakes felt good. The car as a whole felt good, just it was lacking in the powertrain department, specifically the engine. The T56 was good, and even the 10-volt Oldsmobile held up well last year. But we were down on power in the straights. At pit race at the Northeast Muscle Car Challenge, we were down like 30 miles per hour in the straights compared to the LS-powered cars, or even cars with just other engines in general. And I think more importantly, we didn't have the reliability that we wanted. The car was burning a ton of oil. We were just having tons of issues with our specific setup. Sometimes it was fuel injection, sometimes it was valve train. And I think most importantly, the engine just did not have good oil pressure in the corners. Even with a baffled pan and overfilling it, we were dropping down to sometimes 6 PSI at 4,000 RPMs. It just wasn't good. Now, I could have done things like an AccuSump, but that's still just kind of a Band-Aid fix. So come late last fall, I decided to sit down and really think through what the future of the power plant was for this car. Was I going to try and rebuild the 455 into something more suited for this, maybe do something like a small block Oldsmobile, or do something more modern like an LS? And I went through all the different options, got ballpark costs, saw what parts were available, and ultimately I determined that for what I do with the car and what my goals are for the car, which is to build a competitive pro touring car that can show up and potentially, or at least the car is capable of winning events. That's what I want, where then it's up to me as a driver to be able to drive it well enough to win. I don't want the car to be holding me back. Now, after thinking about all that stuff, ultimately I determined that the LS was going to be the best bet. Now, this wasn't just about horsepower and torque and making it make more power, because honestly I can make an Oldsmobile engine make the same power that this does, but I can't make an Oldsmobile engine be as light as this, considering the fact it's entirely aluminum, and also have the aftermarket support that this has and the oiling system that this has, which I'll get into in a little bit. But I'm not hell-bent on keeping this Oldsmobile powered, so I didn't look at it as if I had to keep the Oldsmobile engine. I just wanted the engine that was the best option for the car, and ultimately I arrived at the fact that the LS engine was going to be the best for what I wanted to do with the car. So once I decided on doing an LS engine, there's a lot of options out there. So there's a few that are typically used in pro touring cars. I think the LS3 is probably the most popular. You see that in most LS swapped pro touring cars, but I knew if I was going to spend the money and do an LS, there was really only one that I wanted to do, and that's really my dream engine, which is the LS7, which is what this is. This came in the C6 Z06 and then the 5th gen Z28, and those are the only cars to ever get this engine. And I've always thought it was really special, especially in the C6 Z06. That's my favorite modern performance car, and one of my favorite things about that car is the LS7. It's 427 cubic inches, all aluminum. Even from the factory, it had a 7,000 RPM red line and made 505 horsepower. But perhaps one of the coolest things about this is it has a factory dry sump system. Now, it's sort of a hybrid between a dry and wet, but it's still much better than anything that I could get in an Oldsmobile engine. And so that was really what I wanted to do. I knew if I was going to do an LS, I was going to go with an LS7. So let's talk about this engine in particular. Now, really the only factory LS7 thing about this is the block. It's a brand new block from GM. I had ordered this a couple months before they discontinued the LS7 altogether. So pretty good timing with that. So it's factory block. It's a Callie's forged crank, Callie's forged rod, Weisco Ford's pistons, Golden Racing engine private label heads, performance design carbon PTR intake. It's a K-Tech oil pump. Obviously I have like an ATI damper. The front drive kit is from Wegner Motorsports. It's a factory style dry sump pan. It's a later style metal pickup tube, and then it's an improved racing oil pan baffle. Now it's a custom comp cam. I think it's Smith Brothers push rods. I think it's factory style rockers with upgraded comp trunnions. And yeah, it's really it. It's not a super crazy build. It's not super exotic. I'll put up the dyno graph now. This engine made 692 horsepower at 6,500 RPMs and 627 pound-feet of torque at around 5,200 RPMs. Now that surprised the engine builder and I because we figured doing a high ram style intake, it was going to make a little more power and a little less torque. Typically, when Chad from Golden Racing Engines builds these style of engines, he sees a little over 700 horsepower and then like high 500s, low 600s for torque. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that the runners in this intake are actually interchangeable. You can take this top hat off and you can insert different length runners, and this ships with the longest runners, which will give us the most torque and the least horsepower. So I could go to shorter runners and probably get it over 700 horsepower, but I would lose mid-range bottom end torque. And honestly, for what I'm doing with this car, which is a mix of autocross and road course, this is going to be the best, I think, overall power and torque package. Sure, it'd be cooler to say it makes over 700 horsepower, but honestly, if it made low 700s, like 705 versus what it does, I'm not going to feel that on track. I think it would be more noticeable in losing a lot of torque on an autocross and accelerating out of those corners. So overall, this works really well. This engine really isn't super aggressive. It's 11-to-1. It's a relatively mild cam. And you know, it'll make this power all day long. There's no crazy cam. This will run great on the streets. Idles well, pulls all the way up to 6,500. It loses about 20 horsepower between 6,500 and redline, but it's really not that big a deal. It's nice to have that extra headroom to be able to rev this out on an autocross and not have to worry about shifting. So now that we've gone over the engine itself, let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of doing this swap. Getting into the pros, as I had mentioned earlier, this makes much more power and even more torque than the old big block Oldsmobile did, so we are going to see an increase in performance, but it's not just about power. Now, I get modern engineering in this engine, which is a big pro in my opinion. You get modern gasket design, modern head design, modern intakes, you know, modern accessory drives. Everything about this engine's updated, so you're going to have better reliability, better performance, better efficiency compared to the older stuff. Sure, I can try and retrofit stuff as I did on my old engine with things like fuel injection, serpentine, and whatnot, but it's still not going to be as good as an OE designed performance engine. Now, another pro of this is huge weight savings. This whole assembly is about 200 pounds lighter than the big block Oldsmobile that's coming out of this, and that's huge on a car that's built for handling. You know, I can make that Oldsmobile engine make the same 700-ish horsepower, but if there's another 200 pounds of weight over the nose, it's not going to handle nearly as well. So this is going to push us right near getting a 50-50 weight balance, and we're actually going to set the engine back a little bit, which I'll talk about later in the video, but this is going to give us leaps and bounds in performance, also from a handling side, not just from an acceleration side. Now, perhaps one of the biggest pros that isn't outright performance, in my opinion, is the dry sump oiling system. Now, when you're doing any sort of hardcore road racing or autocrossing where you're seeing a lot of G-force, you don't really want a wet sump system. For those who don't know, a wet sump system is where the oil is contained in the pan in the bottom of an engine and the oil pump and pickups down there, which is, you know, what you typically see on most cars, like old school V8s and stuff. A dry sump system, the oil is held externally in an oil tank. The pump is still in the engine. In this case, in some dry sump systems, like most aftermarkets, it mounts next to the crank and is driven off of it. But that's the big thing with the dry sump, is the oil is held in a baffled tank that is a little better shape and design at holding oil, so you're not worried about starving the pump around corners. You can get aeration problems, and there are some nuances you have to worry about with dry sumps, but it's a much better system. That's why you see that on pretty much all professionally made race cars or high-end performance cars. Now, let's get into some of the cons of doing this swap. Now, number one's obviously going to be price. This by no means is a budget build. We're way out of the realm of you know, a junkyard build or a cheap LS build. I think there's a common misconception that all LS builds are cheap horsepower, when that's definitely not the case. Now, would I have saved a little money perhaps rebuilding the Oldsmobile engine? If we're just going to look at cost, sure, because I already had like the heads in black and intake and whatnot, but when you get to this level of engine build, it's going to be expensive no matter what it is. I'm not going to talk specific prices in this video, but once the swap's done, I'm probably going to do like a price breakdown, because I think it's pretty eye-opening. I don't think a lot of people really talk about, especially with pro touring builds, once you do like a level of this LS engine, how much it actually costs and what's actually involved in doing it, because it's not cheap by any means. Now, is it worth the price versus performance? You know, it's debatable person to person. you know, in my opinion, the performance I get, but also with those other added benefits, I think it's worth it for what I want to do. But this is also my dream engine. I could have saved a little money here and there, but I figured if I'm going to spend the money to do an LS engine, you know, from the ground up, I'm going to make it exactly how I want it, like the carbon fiber intake, the billet, valve covers, things like that. So there were definitely areas to save on this, but I figured I'd just buy once, cry once, and get it exactly how I wanted. Now, perhaps the biggest con in people's eyes is going to be that the car is no longer Oldsmobile powered, which I understand. You know, it's kind of bittersweet getting rid of an Oldsmobile engine. If there was better aftermarket support for Oldsmobile engines, I probably would have done that. Like if there was an aftermarket aluminum Oldsmobile block or something like that, like the Pontiac guys have, I would have definitely seriously considered that. But the support's just not there. You know, when it comes to aftermarket accessory kits or selections of cylinder heads or blocks or anything like that, it's just not there for the Oldsmobile community. I didn't want to have to go through the headache of doing a bunch of custom parts. Sure, could I have spent the time to engineer and made them? Yes, but then if it breaks, I can't just run to a store and get a seal or a part like I can with this. It would be the headache of trying to make more custom parts and, you know, do different iterations of designs. And I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to get something that was pretty reliable and could perform well. Now, really my main goal with this is to have a competitive autocross and road race car. I wasn't, you know, I'm a pro touring enthusiast first and Oldsmobile enthusiast second. I don't want to like go to an event, come in fifth because the car is way underpowered and then be like, oh, well, it's faster than Oldsmobile powered. I just want to have a fast pro touring car, and ultimately this was the best way to get there. In the future, if something comes out, maybe I'll look at going back to Oldsmobile powered and like stuff this in a Corvette or something that needs an engine, but for my immediate goals with the car and what's available right now on the market, this was hands down the best option. Now, another con, which may be a con to some people, is that this isn't a direct swap. It's not a simple swap. There's going to be fabrication work, especially with the LS7 versus other LS engines, that you're going to have to do to get this in. You know, there's clearance issues with the steering linkage with the oil pan on any LS engines, but on the LS7, because I'm using a dry sump, the pan's a little thicker, so I can't use like a Holley swap pan or anything. So we're gonna have to set the engine back to get it to clear. Some people space the engine up, but I don't want to raise up the weight like that. So that's gonna be a challenge in itself, and also trying to find a spot to mount the dry sump tank. I already have a spot picked out. I've already filmed some videos in this swap series before this one, but that's something I'd alluded to in my winter plans video, is we're gonna have to cut the core support, and that was to do the dry sump tank in the front, because that's the simplest. But ultimately, we're probably going to cut it where the factory blower motor goes in the cowls, which it's actually already cut. You can't see that off camera, but so that's, you know, a headache of having to plumb that, do a different style heater and all that. So there's definitely some custom fabrication work involved in doing this level of LS swap. It's not as simple as like getting a new bell housing, throwing it in, doing a new fuel injection system, and off you go. So there's definitely some work that needs to be done there. And if you're willing to do the work, I think the end result is worth it, but it's definitely not simple, and that can be a con and a turnoff for some people. So I already have some of this swap figured out as far as parts. I know I'm doing a CNR racing radiator. I have it sitting behind the camera. I'm doing American racing headers, which I also have. I got those back in January. They're 1 7/8 primaries to 3-inch collectors, but there's still a lot of the swap that I'm going to figure out as I go along. I also have the dry sump tank. It's an AV8 2.5 gallon. Which was a size to fit in that cowl. I would like to have gone bigger, but as far as fitting it in the cowl where I want to put it, that was the biggest I could go with. So there's a lot of little odds and ends I need to figure out. What I'm doing for exhaust, I'm probably going to make my own positioning of things, how I'm going to plumb things, doing an oil cooler, little things like that. There's a lot of little details that I'm going to sort out as the swap goes along, but I'm really excited for this. I think this is going to take the car to the next level. It's funny because last year, this car kind of felt like the opposite of a muscle car. Usually with muscle cars, you think that there's big power and then like the chassis and suspension and everything else sucks. Like they're way overpowered, but this car felt underpowered last year. The suspension and chassis and everything felt great, but the car felt like a dog. It didn't want to come out of corners. It didn't want to accelerate down the straights. When you got up to the top end, like on a full road course, it just fell on its face. And it really just wasn't well suited for what I wanted to do because the engine was letting it down. So yeah, it's not an Oldsmobile engine, and some people say it's not original or it's boring. I mean, I would argue this is about as exotic of an LS swap as you could get. I've never seen another Cutlass with a dry sump LS7 in it, or even an A-body for that matter. There might be a few out there, but they're very few and far between. So I'm really excited for this. I think it's going to help elevate the car to the next level and you know, really make this thing capable on track, but also even on the street. This cam is more mild than it was in the 455, so I'm excited. There should be much less headaches with this This is already run, broken in, ready to go. So now it's just a matter of getting this thing swapped in. So hope you guys are excited for the swap series. This is the introduction. We're just kind of, introducing the engine and going over the plans. But I already have episode 2 filmed, which is disassembling the car. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but the whole front end of the car is ripped off. So we're going to be going over, the cost, step by step, what is involved in swapping in an LS7 and setting it up. The headaches we go through to get everything dialed in, but yeah, I hope you guys are excited. There's going to be a lot of cool Pro Touring content coming this year. Obviously, we're going to have the swap. We're going to have shaking the car down and dialing it in with the new setup. We're going to be having some car features and event coverage later on. So it's going to be a really exciting year here for the channel. I know it was a couple months since I posted, really because I was waiting for this engine. This intake was like, it took 4 months to come in. It was crazy. I almost abandoned doing it. But in the end, we were able to get it, and I'm glad because this thing is killer. Like, this thing looks like a piece of art. I almost feel bad putting it in a car. It's one of the most beautiful engines I've ever seen. So yeah, leave a like if you guys liked the video. Dislike it if you wish I kept it Oldsmobile powered. Feel free to comment below if there's anything you want to see from the channel or if you have any questions about the swap. And subscribe if you guys want to see more. I already have episode 2 coming out next week, which will be disassembly. And there should be weekly content as we're doing this swap. And as soon as we're done with the swap, I'm going to be into more frequent releases as we're running the car at events. We're into the full swing of things now. So it's going to be an exciting year. So I'll see you guys in the next one.